Hello and welcome to the Practical Animal channel. Have you ever wondered what it takes to work with reptiles and snakes? The channel is for you if you want to know what it takes to work with animals. That could be with wild animals or domestic ones. If with domestic animals, it could be with companion animals, dogs or cats, or perhaps you want to work with agricultural livestock, farm animals. Alternatively, perhaps you want to work with wildlife as perhaps a field biologist in the field, or working with animals as part of a collection, such as by being a zookeeper. Whatever your preference, we aim to cover it all. Every week I interview an animal industry professional, asking him what it takes to work with the animal that that person is specialised in. I ask what the skills are and the personal qualities needed to work with that animal. We've been doing this for 2 years now, and the dominant personal quality seems to be patience, not surprisingly. My next guest is Professor Mark O Shea, who is a herpetologist. I interviewed Mark last week, but he was full of so much interesting information that I wanted to continue with that interview today. So from last week's recording, here is more information on what it takes to work with snakes. Hope you enjoy it as much as I enjoyed arranging it. Thank you. Mark, what has been your proudest moment working with snakes? Is it the MBE?
I think there are probably several. I mean, receiving the honorary Doctor of Sciences from the university in 2001. In 2000, the Explorers Club of New York awarded me one of only 8 Millennium Awards for services to exploration. Mine was in zoology. Other recipients were included Sir Ranulph Fiennes, Sir Chris Bonington, and Buzz Aldrin. So it was quite good company. The BBC were thinking of filming it, and then they said, hang on, we've got rather a lot of award ceremonies this year. There's Footballer of the Year. We'll do it next time. The clue's in the name. It's the Millennium Awards. Okay, so that was a proud moment, getting that, especially as my mother was dying. And I was able to take the medal back up and put it on her pillow in the hospice, and she passed away 10 days later. And I was glad that she'd seen me achieve that, because my father had gone in the 90s, you know, she never knew about my honorary DSC. What else? In 2018, a group of German herpetologists described a new pipe snake from Bawano Island to the west of Seram in Indonesia, and they asked me if they could call it Cylindrophis O Shea. And any biologist will know that that's a real feather in your cap. Things get named after you when you die. I don't know if people feel guilty then and feel they should have honored you in your life, but it's nice to actually receive the accolade while you're still breathing air. So yes, I'm very proud of that. I think the icing on the cake is receiving my MBE from the Princess Royal at Windsor Castle on 30th of November last year. Now I was told that I'd been given an MBE in about May, June 2020. And of course, you know that you're sworn secrecy. You're not allowed to tell anybody. Otherwise, it's not the palace you go to, it's the tower. So you're not allowed to tell anybody until they've released it to the press, which normally is 2 or 3 weeks. And I bet people are bursting. Well, I'd been bursting to tell people, but couldn't, and then forgotten about it because they didn't actually tell the media until October. So that's quite a few months later. You sort of tend to have forgotten it. And then there was a bit of media interest. And of course, then we're in a pandemic. How are we going to do this? And so I just thought, oh, you could have it sent in the post, or you could have it from the local Lord Lieutenant, or you could wait and do it the traditional way. And I thought, well, I'm a traditionalist. I'll wait and do it the traditional way. And so I waited until it was time to go down. And it was Windsor Castle, and it was a Princess Royal, and she was lovely, absolutely lovely. We were talking for several minutes about snakebite, because my MBE was for further higher education, zoology, reptile conservation, and snakebite research, because I've been working on snakebite in Papua New Guinea, in Sri Lanka, and in 2018 in Myanmar, and so snakebite was the one that was of most interest. Everyone wanted to know about that. Princess Royal, she's standing and she lifts her arm up like that, and she's doing this. And people said, well, what was she doing? I said she was telling me about somebody she's seen in Zambia with flesh hanging off their arm. And I told her it's either a spitting cobra bite or a puff adder, because they're cytotoxic. So she was really interested in the subject. And that was, and she stood up the whole time. Everybody, I mean, she doesn't get a break. It's tremendous. It really is how she does that. And she'll talk to everybody for not just hello, how do you do, for some time. And I was very impressed. But it was nice to talk about snakebite. So, which is something that I hammer on about a lot, because it has been a neglected disease, and it's a disease of poor people with no voice in developing countries. I'm a Westerner. When I've had snake bites, people have pulled out the stops. That doesn't happen for people in developing countries.
Yeah, it's a fascinating subject, the whole question of snakebite and snakebite research. But Mark, what's your guiltiest pleasure at work? You're the biggest celebrity I've probably interviewed. I have to ask that question.
I know, and I can't think of one. I'm usually working so full on. I mean, I can't think what a guilty pleasure would be. Honestly, I am stumped. I am genuinely stumped. Guilty pleasure.
Watching book deadlines fly away?
Oh, God. I mean, I'm always on deadlines. I mean, I'm writing 2 books at the moment, 2 chapters for 2 other books. I've got about 4 scientific papers with co-authors on the go at the moment. Deadlines, you live by deadlines. And I seem to spend every waking hour when I'm at home in front of my computers working. But I enjoy that. I mean, I suppose I do enjoy my job. And that's why I couldn't retire, because I'm old enough to retire. But why would it? If you turned your interest, your hobby, into your job decades ago, what do you do when you retire? Because that gives you more time for your hobby. So that's, what do I do? Find a new hobby. I mean, I am interested in other things apart from reptiles and amphibians. I'm interested in military history. I'm interested in island biogeography. I like to go fishing for a quiet moment, but I haven't been for about 5 years because I can't justify the time. But if your hobby is your job, I'm paid to do my hobby, and have been for, crikey, since the 1980s, I suppose.
I suppose your guiltiest pleasure then could be being paid to do what you love to do.
Yes, I suppose that is, but don't tell them. Keep that to yourself. And yes, I think that probably is true. I mean, obviously it's not always roses, but then, and let's face it, working with venomous snakes is definitely not always fun. sometimes it's, oh dear.
I suppose you could say every time you milk a venomous snake and walk away in one piece.
Yeah, or when I was doing I was doing a lot of photography for a book I was working on, and I was photographed. I spent about 3 days solid just working on my own in a rattlesnake collection, photographing a lot of rattlesnakes. And I'd have the snakes out, and I'd have a set built to photograph the snake on, and then I'd have a white set where I could put it so that if we wanted the snake on white, we didn't have to cut it out. And I spent one day doing all the small montane species, and then another day doing all the really big, heavy-bodied lowland species, things like timber rattlesnakes and western and eastern diamondbacks and tropical rattlers. And some of these snakes, I mean, I'm getting them to adopt the position, and then getting the photos and getting them to look in this direction, that direction, whatever. And sometimes they'll be striking, and I'm staying just out of strike range, and I'm working on to finish with that snake, put it away, get the next one out. And I must have photographed 80 snakes, rattlesnakes, over the period of 3 days. And I was working intensely, and I knew what I was doing. And then I was packing up, and I was walking out to go back to see my colleagues. Oh, and at night time, we'd been out on the roads catching rattlesnakes and photographing them. 8 species. 8 species, you know, one in I think 3 out of every 4 snakes we saw on the roads was a rattlesnake. And I was walking out, and I saw the quarantine room, and I thought, oh, I wonder if there's anything there I haven't seen. I walked in, I'd look around, got it. Oh, Crotalus viridis concolor, which should be Crotalus oreganus concolor, but that's a rattlesnake species I've never seen. So I pulled the drawer out. Mistake. He was waiting, just strung out, got me in the thumb. I had to push him back in with my foot and close the door, and he got me. And so that was a medevac to across the desert to hospital. That was serious, because the ambulance didn't think they were going to get me there, because it was 3.5 hours drive across the desert, and I wasn't well. So, you know, yeah. So working with venomous snakes, yes, you've got to be. Accidents, by their definition, happen when you least expect them. And when I'm working with anything dangerous, I give it my total concentration, because that's the way to avoid having an accident. There's many aspects of herpetology that don't involve being up close and personal with venomous snakes. And it isn't something you go into immediately either. You know, when I've got students working on projects, when I was with venturers in New Guinea or West Africa or Central America or somewhere like that, absolutely forbidden to touch venomous snakes, because I'll teach them how to identify them, but I won't teach them how to go and pick them up and catch them, because there's no need for them to be doing that unless they decide that that is their career. And then it's a gradual process. It's not something you learn in a month in the field.
Mark, what are the skills, personal experiences, and personal qualities that have been key to your success as an herpetologist?
Let me think. There are certain obvious skills for a life in science. And these are things like learning to write in an interesting way. Now, I don't mean learning to write. I mean learning to write in an interesting way. So if you've got to write an essay or a paper or a book or something, you're trying to get a message over, and you're hoping that by the time they reach the end, your reader has understood what you're trying to convey and is in agreement with you. But it's not just a mechanical exercise of getting them to the end and agreeing with you. You want them to have enjoyed the journey. And so I think good writing skills are very important. Learning to write in a style that is enjoyable to read. Everybody's got their little cliched phrases that they overuse when they write something. And it's fine to use them occasionally, but not every other sentence or every other paragraph. And so when students are writing, what I say is, okay, when you've written what you've written, give it to somebody to read back to you, and you lie there with your eyes closed and listen to it as a third party, and listen for any clunky language, any poor grammar, anything that actually makes it ragged and jagged and hard to listen to. You want it to flow. I'm not talking about writing Shakespearean English. I'm talking about writing something that people enjoy. And there's an author I'll mention in a minute who I feel does that and brings science over in a way that is comprehensible to a lay audience. That's one thing. Learning to write your ideas down in a way that people will not only understand them, but enjoy understanding them. Another one is learning to speak, learning to stand up and address an audience. And I started doing public speaking when I was about 18, going around Rotary clubs, Rotaract, Round Table, taking snakes around, talking about them to gentlemen in dinner jackets, and then doing lots and lots of other sorts of lectures. And now, and I'm fine with, it doesn't bother me at all. I like to speak to an audience. And it's a skill that people are nervous about picking up, and we try to train our students to be able to stand up and give a presentation on something for between 3 and 5 minutes. And that 3 to 5 minutes to them is an eternity. But if you enjoy speaking, you go, is that all? Can I have a bit more time? Because you feel that you want to get more information over, and it's having the confidence to do that and learning to, because if you're after a science career, it's not just about getting your degree and getting out there and getting a job. If you're working in a biological environment, at some point you're going to have to write stuff down for people to read, and at another point you're going to have to stand up and talk about what you're doing. If it's only to a school trip coming to see your nature reserve, you need to be able to stand there and tell the children what's happening and why you're doing this and what's interesting about it. And so speaking skills are also important, and all sorts of things. Basic statistics and important one for a biologist is understanding how you use zoological nomenclature. The writing of the correct use of scientific names is so important. And there are half a dozen important rules. If you learn those, you won't go wrong. But it's so often you see them incorrectly used, scientific names written incorrectly. And I'll give you an example. I was looking at an article in a national paper, one of the broadsheets, it's a good few years ago now, and it was about a new dinosaur that had been discovered in China. And it was an interesting piece, and it was by our science editor, it said, and I'm reading through it, and then it came to the scientific name, and it had been written with a large case initial letter for both the genus and the species. And I thought, okay, science editor's on vacation. This is the sports editor writing this, because you don't do that. And it jumps out. And it says to anyone who's at all biologically trained, this guy is not a scientist. And so learning to use scientific nomenclature correctly is an important skill and an easy one to learn. We produce crib sheets, about A5 crib sheets, which have got the important rules of using zoological nomenclature on one side. And incidentally, for botany, there's another set of rules for botany, and there's one for bacteriology as well. And then on the other side, we've got Harvard referencing, because you need to know how to cite papers that you've included in your in-text citations at the end of your paper. And if you're not using something like EndNote, which does it automatically for you, and you're having to do it by hand, it's not sufficient to just cut and paste from the documents that you've used and drop them in, because you sometimes get one where all the authors are in large case, and then you'll get another one where only the first letters are in large case. You'll get somewhere the journals are italicized, somewhere they're not. And so you end up with this whole hodgepodge of ill-fitting references at the end. And it's important to learn to do proper referencing. These are basic skills, and they're not hard to learn, but they'll set you right.
I hope you enjoyed watching that video as much as I enjoyed making it. In the meantime, let's enjoy a little bit of bird watching as we watch a blackbird demonstrating some agonistic or aggressive behaviour towards two pied wagtails. The pied wagtail with the all black back is the male, whilst the pied wagtail with the grey back is the female. And stay with this finale, because at the very end you see how beautiful is the back of the male. You can see there's a little bit of purple haze in there and a little bit of glossy green. They really are beautiful birds. I hope you found my interview with Mark O Shea informative, educational, and maybe even witty in places. Mark is an expert on reptiles and snakes. He has worked with them practically all of his life. He is the author of several books on the subject, numerous television documentaries, and countless public appearances. I interviewed him last week, and the interview was so full of good information that I'm making a series of videos from the interview, and we continue next week with Mark.